Fans of this channel won't be surprised to hear me say I love sci-fi horror. I've been a fan since far too young an age, with my entry points being 1979's Alien, 1982's The Thing, and 1986's The Fly, all of which I've already covered. Sure, after seeing them I went back and watched several classics like the Universal horrors, but to me, the kind of dread, terror, and anxiety produced by those three films were unmatched. That was until I discovered a little picture from 1955 that contains the DNA of all three of those more recent movies, which I now know were just advanced mutations of a sci-fi horror so powerful that it skyrocketed an entire movie studio into becoming one of the biggest names in horror cinema.
A rocket has crash-landed by a small English cottage, and alongside its sole surviving crew member Victor is a puzzling mystery. The other crew members have vanished without a trace, and Victor is suffering from an unknown ailment, unable to communicate or explain what has happened. Professor Bernard Quatermass, the head of the experiment that sent the rocket to space to begin with, begins his investigation and slowly comes to learn that something alien stowed away aboard the rocket and is now threatening all life on planet Earth.
In the 1930s, the comedian William Hines, who worked under the stage name of Will Hammer, founded both his own movie production studio, called Hammer Productions Limited, and also, partnering with theater owner Enrique Carreras, a small film distribution company called Exclusive Films. However, just a few short years after its founding, and with only a handful of films under its belt, Hammer went bankrupt. Exclusive Films, on the other hand, was able to stay afloat throughout World War II. After the war, the company founders' sons, Anthony Hines and James Carreras, helped rebuild Hammer as a production house that specialized in low-budget quickies that tended to serve as supporting features for bigger productions. Exclusive Films then got a significant boost in 1951 when they signed a 4-year deal with American film producer-distributor Robert Lippert, who agreed to repackage and distribute British films in America, as well as offering American films for distribution in Great Britain. This deal with Exclusive allowed Hammer to take moderately more risks as a film company, as well as purchase what would become its primary base of operations, Bray Studios. Meanwhile, over at BBC Television, a 6-week window opened up in the summer of 1953's Saturday night schedule, and the studio heads decided it would be a good place to put a more adult-themed science fiction program. The BBC had found success in family-friendly science fiction, but with the acquisition of award-winning writer Nigel Kneale, they were prepared to try something more daring. Thus, they released the QUATERMASS XPERIMENT, a 6-episode series written by Kneale that went a bit darker than your average sci-fi program. Unfortunately, 4 of the 6 episodes have been lost to time, but the series was a smash hit for the BBC, averaging roughly 4 million viewers an episode. 2 days after the final episode aired, the BBC got a call from none other than Anthony Hines, who expressed interest in buying the film rights for Hammer and Exclusive. The BBC, though, had an eager Nigel Kneale telling them to shop it around to other producers, including Sidney Gilliat and Frank Launder, who refused to buy the rights for fear of the dreaded X certificate being applied by the BBFC, the British Board of Film Censors. The X certificate, which barred anyone under 16 from entering the theater, had only been minted a couple of years prior, and very few X films had thus far been made, much less been financially successful. Though the BBC wasn't too keen to hand Quatermass over to a small company like Hammer, Hammer wasn't scared of the X. In the end, they even embraced it by putting an X front and center in the title. Thus, the BBC sold the rights to Hammer for 500 quid. To direct the Quatermass experiment on a budget of around £40,000, Hammer turned to Val Guest, a director the studio had worked with before who was known more for comedies like Just William's Luck and Life with the Lions. He wasn't particularly interested in science fiction, but he was reportedly convinced to take on Quatermass by his wife, the actress Yolanda Donlan, after Hines sent him the original's teleplays. Hammer tapped Richard Landau, the writer of Spaceways, another Hammer sci-fi film, to write the screenplay, which greatly condensed Neil's original teleplays, focused more on the horror, and changed the ending. Hammer was under obligation to submit scripts to the BBFC in advance of filming, and the BBFC predictably gave Landau's script a tentative X, though they expressed grave reservations about the graphic nature of the horror and violence. To combat this, Val Guest reworked the script himself, removing over 30 pages and toning down the graphic horror in favor of suspense. The topic of today's video was voted on by my patrons. If you'd like to have a say in some of the movies I cover, want to see bonus content, or just wish to support the growth of this channel, check out my Patreon or consider becoming a channel member. I'd like to give a special shout out to my $8 androids: Batty Bat Firebrand, Chuck Poor, Diane McGill Davis, Giffen Chumley, Jack Blair, John Burrell, Mike O'Connor, Numinous 2019, Patrick Baker, Robert McGill, Sean Vale, Spoats, TB Shrumick, and Warren Davis. I sincerely couldn't do this without you guys, so thank you all. In early pre-production, Peter Cushing was considered to play the lead role of Professor Bernard Quatermass, but under the conditions of Hammer's deal with Lippert, which stipulated a certain amount of American acting talent, the role went to Lippert's choice of American character actor Brian Donlevy, whose career at the time, highlighted by films like Beau Geste and Impact, was on the downslide. Donlevy's far more brusque and commanding performance was greatly disliked by original writer Nigel Neal, but in the humble opinion of this American reviewer, his might be my favorite version of the character, and I feel the need to point out that Donlevy is the only actor to ever appear on screen as Quatermass more than once. And by the way, for those of you already furiously typing out a comment about my pronunciations, I confirmed with multiple sources that his name is pronounced Donlevy, not Donlevy. The most interesting performance in the film, though, belongs to the great-great-grandson of William Wordsworth, Richard Wordsworth, who plays the mute Victor Carroon. He is the monster of the film and is often put favorably alongside Karloff's creature by critics. Wordsworth, and it just occurred to me how ironic it is that a guy named Wordsworth doesn't say a word, is great, and even though he barely moves or emotes, he is hauntingly alien and enigmatically menacing throughout. Incidentally, Stephen King borrows the name of Victor Carroon for his short story The Jaunt, one of my personal favorites of his. A less successful performance is that of Marja Dean as Carroon's wife Judith. Dean was sent over from America by Lippert because she was the girlfriend of the Fox president at the time. Though she was a very sweet person, according to Val Guest, she just couldn't act, and that much is obvious to anyone who watches the movie. Luckily, her character is pared down significantly from the television version, and therefore she doesn't ruin too much of the movie. I swear I'm not trying to be mean, but it is what it is.
You should be very proud to have a husband who's willing to risk his life for the betterment of the whole world.
What world? Your world? The world of Quatermass.
One fun cameo is in this scene, an obvious homage to 1931's Frankenstein, in which the girl is played by future Paul McCartney fiancée Jane Asher. Other actors worth noting are Jack Warner as Inspector Lomax.
I don't read science fiction, I'm a plain, simple Bible man.
David King Wood as Dr. Briscoe, Maurice Kaufman as Marsh, Harold Lang as Christie, Dame Thora Hird as the Una O'Connor-inspired Rosie, and Gordon Jackson as the poor television producer whose live documentary gets interrupted by an alien creature threatening to take over the world. So this is Editing Eric, and I just want to say I don't know how or why I forgot to mention Lionel Jeffries. Filming began in October of 1954 at Bray Studios in Windsor, with some location shooting done throughout the area, at the Chessington Zoo, which stands in for the London Zoo and Regent's Park, and at the exterior of Westminster Abbey, though the interiors were all done on sound stages because they weren't allowed to film inside the actual Abbey. The makeup work was put together by Phil Leakey, and the special effects, including the climactic miniature of the monster in the Abbey made with tripe and cow guts mixed with rubber, were supervised by Les Bowie. Or is it Bowie? Whatever. Both men deserve a lot of credit due to the film's microscopic budget, and they would both become Hammer staples as it entered into its ultra-successful horror phase. For me, though, I think the music, composed by another future Hammer regular, James Bernard, is even more notable. His 3-note theme is used to great effect throughout the entire score, and it is unquestionably a precursor to John Williams' Jaws theme as well as Bernard Herrmann's revolutionary Psycho score. Every once in a while, it even sounds like Ennio Morricone's minimalist score for 1982's The Thing. I really wish I could play samples of all of these alongside the Quatermass score to prove my point, but the copyright bots would probably nuke my house from orbit if I did. The Quatermass Experiment premiered in the United Kingdom on August 26, 1955, and went wide in November, timed to coincide with the television release of Quatermass 2, as a double bill with Rafifi. It had good, if not glowing, reviews, and became the most financially successful double bill of the year, though exact numbers are hard to come by. With some light edits and a new title, The Creeping Unknown, it then released in the United States in June, again as a double bill, this time with the bizarre but star-studded The Black Sleep. It proved a big box office success in America as well, so much so that United Artists, the film's American distributor which purchased the film from Lippert, offered to co-finance the inevitable sequel. As for its legacy, let me put it this way. There are certain movies that should be considered major landmarks in the history of film, and The Quatermass Experiment is absolutely one of those movies. Over in the United Kingdom, it was just the next step for an already growing Quatermass phenomenon, but in America, this was the introduction for most audiences, who were enamored with it. The movie would retroactively be seen as the coming-out party for Hammer horror, as its success convinced the studio to go all in on the genre by reinventing the Universal classics. Stay tuned for this October, by the way. It was so successful for the studio, in fact, that Hammer no longer needed Lippert, because bigger distributors came knocking. Hammer did eventually adapt Quatermass 2 after unsuccessfully trying to produce its own sequel, X the Unknown, a movie that did release but which has no legal connection to Quatermass, and would also adapt Quatermass and The Pit, the third BBC serial based around the character. However, Hammer horror is far more than just Quatermass, to the point that it is its own recognized subgenre within horror. To put it simply, the Quatermass Experiment has a legacy almost as big as something like Star Wars or Dracula. And personally speaking, yeah, it deserves its reputation. It's incredibly ahead of its time, and despite its complete lack of budget, it's one of the best sci-fi horrors ever made. Period. Like I said in my intro, you can see how it inspired Ridley Scott's Alien, hell, Ripley even has a cameo, and how it influenced the future body horror of David Cronenberg. I also mentioned 1982's The Thing, and John Carpenter has been very upfront about how much he borrowed from the tone and style of the Quatermass Experiment when making it. In effect, the sci-fi horror I love so much wouldn't even exist without this movie. Quatermass is practically the Typhoid Mary of modern sci-fi horror, but it is no less potent than the strains that came after. Sure, it ultimately boils down to the distrust of scientific progress that is so common in science fiction, even as far back as Frankenstein, but as cautionary tales that predate the space age go, I'd say it's far more poignant than other sci-fi classics like The Day the Earth Stood Still or It Came from Outer Space. Great films that I am in no way trying to denigrate. Is it flawless? Of course not. It ends far too quickly, something I blame on the budget more than anything else, and the pacing can be a bit awkward towards the middle. But these are just nitpicks I point out because, well, I feel obligated to do so. At the end of the day, if I haven't made it clear enough, the Quatermass Experiment is, without a doubt, a sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's your favorite Hammer horror? Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time when Anthony Hopkins will try to become a race car driver, this is the Unapologetic Geek telling you to never be ashamed of what you love, as long as you're not hurting anybody.
It's not a gin goblin.
No, Rosie, this time it was real.